The 2014 Formula One season begins today as the cars are fired up for the first time in testing. Major changes to the regulations make it one of the most eagerly anticipated seasons in recent history. Well, Craig Slater is in Jerez for us. And Craig, very good morning to you. So Formula One fans have been waiting all winter to see what the new cars will look like. So what's in store on day one of testing?
I think it could be a very exciting day, certainly a dramatic day, and you join us with perfect timing because Lewis Hamilton has just arrived with his dog Roscoe for the first day of testing. A new haircut, Lewis sporting as well, very businesslike as he marches off straight away to the Mercedes hospitality area. A big day for this team in particular. You would think Mercedes have set great store by this change in the regulations, the shift to V6 turbo engines. They are an engine manufacturer and they've brought Lewis Hamilton, you would think, in to win the championship this year. There's a little bit of now or never about this season for Mercedes. It's a good time for them to come in here with these new engines and perhaps stop this Red Bull domination we've had for the last 4 years. But yes, only 12 days of testing altogether for all the teams, so absolutely vital that they get out and get good track running here today. The dawn of a new era. It's still pitch black at Jerez this morning, but we will see 5 further cars launched today as well, in addition to the ones we've already seen. Yesterday evening, we saw the new Toro Rosso, which was sporting, like many of the other cars we've seen this season, this anteater type nose, this sort of very thin protuberance at the front end of the car. We've seen 3 different versions of different noses thus far of the cars we've seen. Ferrari had a rather different type of design, a rather broader nose to the front of their car, and the Lotus car, which hasn't officially been launched, but we have had reports, they've got a kind of double tip, a kind of forked tongue on the end of the nose as well, whereas McLaren, similar to Toro Rosso, have this little thin end to the nose. They're all there for the same kind of purpose. The idea is for them to try and get as much airflow underneath the car to create an area of low pressure with high pressure on the top of the car. That aids the downforce, so it will help their cornering type of speeds. But it is very interesting seeing all these new designs, and as I say, 5 further cars unveiled this morning, including the new Mercedes and including the Red Bull as well. Fascinating to see if they can continue where they left off in the previous set of regulations. 4 successive Constructors and Drivers' Championships. It really would be quite an achievement for them if they can bridge the divide and win it again this year.
OK, so the teams are showing us the type of car that they have. What are they looking to achieve today, though?
Well, these won't be representative conditions for the rest of the season, Mike. Jerez is not on the Formula One circuit. It's still very cold at the moment. It will warm up during the course of the day. It might get up to 20 degrees here if we're lucky a little bit later on. But it's essentially mechanical testing is what they'll be undertaking for the next few days. Because we have these new power units, these hybrid systems with enormous stress on the energy recovery system, twice the power for them, and they're in operation 5 times as long as they were previously. We had the old Jerez system, which used to harvest power from the brakes. Now we get power also harvested from the turbo engines themselves. So it's ironing out those kind of glitches in those systems which will be the key aspect today. And it is an issue for the likes of Marussia, who last night announced they wouldn't be here, and for Lotus as well, who are missing this test. They will be falling behind potentially the other teams in terms of getting on top of all these mechanical issues. Christian Horner, the Red Bull team principal, suggesting that maybe as many as half the field might not finish the first race in Australia because of reliability problems. So it is absolutely vital that the teams get out on the track and give these new systems as much of a test as they possibly can. So I think most of the teams today will be doing in excess of 100 laps, and Lewis Hamilton we'll see on track today as well, and we will get to speak to him afterwards and get his verdict on how these new cars feel. We'll also be interested to hear how he thinks they sound as well, because they will sound a little bit different from the V8 engines we've had in the past. So yeah, the dawn of a new era today. It is hugely exciting and a hugely significant day for Formula One.
Indeed, looking forward to it, Craig. Just to let you know, Alex, excited about the cars even more. That's Craig Slater in Jerez, and we're waiting for the unveiling of the Mercedes car. Over to you, Craig.
Thank you very much, Mike. Yes, an eagerly awaited unveiling, and Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg just doing the honours with this W5, the new Mercedes, many people's favourite to win the World Championship this year. It's hard to get a view of it in actual fact, but I'm just going to step back just to see if we can properly see this new nose as much as anything else, and there it is. Mercedes, once amongst the favourites to win this year's World Championships because they are an engine manufacturer, and it is felt that engines will be the differentiators, or powertrains, I suppose, as we ought to call them, because they are hybrid systems now. And Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg fancied to do well in this era of fuel conservation as well. 1/3 less fuel the drivers are going to be able to use this season compared to last season. So those that can economically get around corners, that can avoid being on the brake and the throttle at the same time, are fancied to do well. I'm just going to bring in Ed, sports Grand Prix editor here. Many people's favourite, this car for the championship this year. How close will what we're seeing now be to what starts in Australia, what, in about 40 or so days' time?
There will be a few changes to come. Obviously, with the new engines, the 1.0 last year's 2.4 litre V8 normally aspirated engine. So testing here at Jerez, just proving the landing it may work. And the aero side will come a little bit later on. Everybody's got reasonably substantial upgrade packages planned for. I mean, the car will look similar, but there will be a lot of detail changes. Quite good news for Mercedes, because if you look at it already almost looks like a mature Formula One car, and it really isn't. So that really bodes well for the team. So
no beam wing on the rear wing. We've got these bigger side pods. The nose has been the big talking point. It's quite hard to get a view of it from where we're standing, but what version have they gone for? What is the general concept here?
Well, they haven't gone for the anteater style that we've seen some teams. It's probably the best looking car, actually, from the glimpses we can see of the nose. It's not a million miles away from the Ferrari, but it's not as swooped down. So I think it's probably the best looking car we've seen so far, actually.
They're all trying to get as much air underneath the car, I suppose, to create low pressure under, because teams are losing downforce this year. There's a lot of talk about it'll be the engines that will be the differentiator, but cars have still got to go around corners, so will this clawing back of downforce, will that still be the battleground, do you sense, as the championship progresses?
Well, it has to be from the chassis side, the aero side. All they can do is add performance to the car. The balance between car and engine, and aero and engine, if you want to put it that way, is much more even than it was. But it's going to be a battle that's won on all fronts. Probably early on, the power unit performance, and more importantly, how the teams use the various energy strategies they can do to make the 100 kilos of fuel for the race last in a very competitive manner. That's going to be key, but inevitably, as the regulations mature and time goes on, the aero will become increasingly important. It's always been in Formula One that it's about the whole car, and perhaps even more so than it has been in the last few years. Now we've got these engines that aren't just proven frozen bolt-on units. So it's going to be down to every area of the team to contribute and to have success.
Just finally, they were second last year, Mercedes. You do sense this is the year they've been preparing for, because the powertrains, the engines are so important. They sound as though they've been ahead of the game. They've already run this car. They brought Lewis Hamilton in, you sense, and paid big money for him to deliver the championship this year. Is there a little bit of a sense of it's now or never for Mercedes, considering their investment, considering that as a car manufacturer, second is nowhere for them? They need to be first. How much is hanging on 2014?
I think there's a lot. It's certainly a case of now, not necessarily never, because there's always next year, but certainly the pressure will build if they don't have success. You're absolutely right in terms of everything's lined up. They've got the drivers. We know how quick Lewis Hamilton is. He's a former champion. Nico Rosberg's a very shrewd, intelligent, hard-working driver who's perhaps not as searingly quick as Lewis over a single lap, but he puts together very, very strong weekends. The engine side at Brixworth, they've been working very closely with the chassis side at Brackley, which is only about 30 miles down the road. So this is a genuine works car, and with the engines being so important, if you like, the works teams, so Mercedes, Ferrari and probably Red Bull with Renault, are the ones that should be in position to do the job.
Great stuff, Ed. Thank you very much. Yeah, plenty more coming up from Jerez here throughout the day. The next car we'll see, and you can see everyone racing down to the Red Bull garage, will be there is the World Champions car, Sebastian Vettel and Daniel Ricciardo, looking to make it a 5th straight Constructors' Championship. We'll bring that to you as soon as the covers come off it.
Yes, thank these amongst it all. And Craig, what else can we look forward to?
These car launches coming thick and fast. Alex, we're going to see 4 cars altogether revealed this morning, and this is the car of the champions. 4 times in succession they've won the Constructors and Drivers' Championships, Red Bull. But if these regulations have been anything, in many people's eyes, they've been almost Red Bull proofing Formula One, because they're very much taken away many of the technologies that Red Bull perfected over the course of the last 4 seasons, particularly exhaust blowing. You can't now blow the exhaust around the rear bodywork, which is something Adrian Newey, their chief designer, mastered. We're just waiting for the covers to be taken off. Sebastian Vettel and Daniel Ricciardo, his new partner, in position. Ted Kravitz is alongside me. Now, this is going to be fascinating, Ted. Can Red Bull become as dominant as they were with these regulations as they were with the previous regulations? And the covers are going to come off. The nose is going to be the first interesting aspect. I'm just going to let you give a running commentary here.
It does look like we've got a low nose in the style of halfway between Mercedes and Ferrari. Actually, it's not the full finger or anteater nose at the front, but it's halfway between that. And you're absolutely right, Craig. I think this is where we're going to see, in many ways, the proving of Red Bull and Adrian Newey, the genius designer, in that now that they have had all their toys taken away from them, can they react and can they take a brand new clean sheet of paper, technologically speaking, and prove that they are better, still the best in the pit lane? So this is going to be absolutely fascinating to see. If it is going to be dominated by engines, then we think they might already have a bit of half a hand tied behind their backs, because we believe Mercedes are ahead of the game on development so far. Of course, Red Bull using the Renault engine, as you can see on the side of the car there. I must say, just looking at the drivers, Sebastian Vettel, just taking some of the dust off the nose there, looks like he looks like a man who's newly made a father, I must say, which of course he is. His girlfriend Hannah gave birth to a baby girl some few weeks ago. So congratulations to him. Still quite a young father at the age of whatever he is, 25, 26. But he looks like he's had a few of the sleepless nights, Craig. You'd know a bit about that as well.
Indeed. Enzo Ferrari used to say becoming a father, I think, takes 2/10 off you as a driver. This is also a big test this season, you'd imagine, for Vettel. He was the master of the techniques of driving that exhaust blown car. Is he going to have to change his style, along with everyone else, I suppose, up and down the grid? But that's going to be the test, isn't it? Who can adapt to these new cars?
He is going to have to change his driving style, but so is everybody else. And actually, if that's one strength that he's got coming into the season, is that he's probably the driver who's most able to do that, who has the most brain capacity to change the way he drives and to adapt to whatever the car's limitations are. Now, one of those major limitations is going to be turbo lag, and anybody will know this if they have a turbo diesel car especially. It won't be quite as bad as a turbo diesel that we drive on the road, but there will be, when the driver puts his foot down, inevitably some turbo lag. Now, that will in large part be tried to be eliminated by the new KERS system, the energy recovery system that actually spins up the turbo and tries to eliminate the turbo lag as they come out of corners. But there still will be a bit of revving to be done to keep the turbo at high pressure, feeding exhaust air into the engine. So the reps go back on. So I think Sebastian is still pretty well placed to keep that number 1 that he keeps on his car. Daniel Ricciardo next to him is taking the number 3 this year. Nobody, it seems, Craig, wants to take the number 2. They've all got choice of numbers, of course. Nobody wants to take the number 2. So Vettel, he looks tired, but I'm sure he's still motivated for another season to come.
Great stuff, Ted. Okay, it's going to be fascinating to see how the teams get on today. All about, I suppose, getting to grips with the mechanical side of reliability today. Christian Horner, the Red Bull team principal, saying that even potentially half the cars might not finish that first Grand Prix in Australia. So ironing out glitches, I think, about the KERS energy recovery, the man out the engines in general, pretty much about today is all about. But it is an exciting day in Formula One. Everyone starts equal, and although Red Bull have dominated for these last four seasons, the reset, the technical reset we have now, does offer their rivals plenty of hope.
Yeah.
Day 1 of winter testing for the new Formula One season, and we'll finally get to see the 2014 cars in action on the track. Red Bull have taken the opportunity to unveil their new car, the Renault-powered RB10, which this season will be driven by 4-time world champion Sebastian Vettel and new driver Daniel Ricciardo. Red Bull, of course, are going for a 5th consecutive drivers' and constructors' title. Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg were also on hand to show off their new car, the Mercedes W05. Both cars feature the low nose required by the new regulations. Mercedes finished 2nd in the constructors' standings last season. Back to Jerez then. Craig Slater waiting for us as always. Craig, has testing started yet?
It has, Mike. A beautiful sun-kissed morning here in Jerez. Not exactly a turbocharged start to affairs on track, I would have to say. We have only had one car out thus far, but Ted Kravitz, perhaps significant who that car was.
Yeah, it was Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. So we managed to get him coming out of the pits, and hopefully we'll be able to have a look at it and just listen to the sound. I'm very pleased to say that actually it sounded pretty good. It wasn't as quiet as many people expected. Obviously, with a turbocharged engine, you're going to lose some of the high exhaust notes that come out of the back of the car, and indeed that you're not going to get the top revving 18,000 RPM that we had last year. They're set at 15,000 RPM this year. So there were fears that the cars were going to sound very quiet. That doesn't seem to be the case. What we did hear was a lot of strange sort of revving sounds and energy recovery systems at play, and I think that's going to be characterized throughout the season. Lots of strange sort of revving when you wouldn't expect to hear the car as the energy recovery systems, the hybrid systems generate electricity on braking and then deliver it again as a boost on acceleration. So yeah, we've seen a statement of intent, if you like, from Mercedes that they intend to do some serious running today. Not what we've heard from Red Bull. Red Bull are going to spend the morning doing press conferences for us. So they're clearly not thinking about running at any great lengths.
It is interesting. We have talked a lot about Mercedes and this being their big chance. Who else will see this as an opportunity to knock Red Bull off their perch?
I think we're looking at Ferrari and McLaren. I think also we're going to look at certainly Lotus are going to hope to get themselves out of the mess they find themselves in at the moment with no team principal and missing this first test to maybe win a race or two. But that will be a bit of an uphill battle for Lotus. So I think we're looking at Ferrari, Mercedes and McLaren to try and topple Red Bull's dominance of Formula One. So we'll see if they can do it, but certainly a decent start for Mercedes. They've managed to already do 40 kilometers of running during a filming day at Silverstone last week. So they're already a little bit ahead of everybody else. We're expecting to see Kimi Räikkönen in the Ferrari out shortly though.
Räikkönen versus Alonso are going to be fascinating this season. Thank you very much for the moment, Ted. Yeah, very calm on the track here at the moment. We hope it is the calm before the storm, because after the winter break, we are desperate to see Formula One cars in action again.
See them, I want to hear them, Craig. That's the big thing for me. Thanks very much for the moment.
It's day one of winter testing for the new Formula One season, and we finally get to see the 2014 cars in action on the track. Just to warn you, there's flash photography coming up. Well, Red Bull also took the opportunity to unveil their new car this morning. The Renault-powered RB10 will be driven by 4-time world champion Sebastian Vettel and new driver Daniel Ricciardo. Red Bull are going for a 5th consecutive Drivers' and Constructors' Championship. Well, Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg were also on hand to show off their new car, the Mercedes W05. Both cars feature the low nose required by the new regulations introduced for 2014. Mercedes finished second in the constructors' standings last season. Here's a look at the new Force India. There's a new driver lineup for them, with Nico Hülkenberg returning to the team for 2014 and Sergio Perez, who joins from McLaren. They've opted for a very slim nose in their attempt to achieve the most effective aerodynamics.
Well, Lewis Hamilton was the first to take his Mercedes out as the testing session began, and he gave us the chance to finally hear the new turbocharged engines.
I'm very pleased to say that actually it sounded pretty good. It wasn't as quiet as many people expected. Obviously, with a turbocharged engine, you're going to lose some of the high exhaust notes that come out of the back of the car, and indeed that you're not going to get the top revving 18,000 RPM that we had last year. They're set at 15,000 RPM this year. So there were fears that the cars were going to sound very quiet. That doesn't seem to be the case.
Now we'll round up all the day's interviews on Sky.
Now, day one of winter testing for the new Formula One season. We finally get to see the 2014 cars in action on the track. Been a busy morning. Lewis Hamilton, one of the first to arrive at the crack of dawn, alongside his dog, Roscoe. Just to warn you, there is flash photography coming up. Once the sun was up, Hamilton and teammate Nico Rosberg unveiled the new Mercedes W05, the team finished second in the constructors' standings last season, and they are one of only 2 teams on the grid whose drivers' lineup is unchanged. Well, the car they'll all be looking to beat, the Renault-powered RB10, unveiled by 4-time world champion Sebastian Vettel and his new Red Bull teammate Daniel Ricciardo. The team are going for a 5th consecutive drivers' and constructors' title. And Force India also revealed their new car. There's a new driver lineup for them. Nico Hülkenberg returning to the team for 2014. And Sergio Perez, who joins from McLaren. They've opted for a very slim nose in their attempt to achieve the most effective aerodynamics.
And it was Lewis Hamilton who was the first to take his Mercedes out as the testing session began, giving us the chance to finally hear the new turbocharged 1.6-litre engines on the track.
I'm very pleased to say that actually it sounded pretty good. It wasn't as quiet as many people expected. Obviously, with a turbocharged engine, you're going to lose some of the high exhaust notes that come out of the back of the car, and indeed that you're not going to get the top revving 18,000 RPM that we had last year. They're set at 15,000 RPM this year. So there were fears that the cars were going to sound very quiet. That doesn't seem to be the case.
Kimi Räikkönen also one of the first to venture out for his first run back in a Ferrari. But didn't manage to complete a full lap, getting just around 4 corners before stopping on the track, meaning a truck had to be sent out to collect the car and to bring it back to the garage to start again. And we will be live to Jerez throughout the morning, and they are just in a similar set, just somewhere around the corner. No, you can join them for all that, of course, every morning. Right, there has been a crash involving Lewis Hamilton at testing in Jerez today. Live to Craig Slater, who is just trackside. Craig, what's happened?
Well, the first thing to report is that Lewis Hamilton is absolutely fine. He'd been the only driver really putting in any kind of sequence of laps during the first day's running here at Jerez today. He was first on track and he was steadily bringing down his laps times. But yes, he has been involved in quite a dramatic incident just here at turn 1, where I'm standing next to Sky Sports' Ted Kravitz. In fact, Ted, I mean, maybe if we get out of the way, we can just let the camera take a look at the skid marks effectively, and we can see how far they run from the pit straight here all the way up to turn 1. We've spoken to a few eyewitnesses here. What have you been able to ascertain about the detail of this incident?
Seems like we're looking at a front wing failure for Mercedes. There was a Spanish film crew who was out here filming at the time, and they say that they saw the pylon, the front wing fail, come underneath the car and then get spat out beneath it. So as we see, actually, for some of the first few laps, Kimi Räikkönen in the Ferrari come past us now. The session has restarted, but it looks to be the end of Lewis Hamilton's day. They're going to want to know if indeed the front wing did fail, why it failed, why some of the loadings on the car made it fail, and whether they can just put a new one on and go out again testing. Of course, we don't know if Mercedes have many new front noses here. It's the beginning of the season. Sometimes they haven't made them all yet. I'm sure they do have at least one spare front nose cone, but they won't even put it on, won't consider putting it on until they know exactly why it failed, if they do indeed confirm that it was a front wing failure. But that's what we're looking at the moment. It would be explained by the lockup and the brake marks. Lewis, the front wing would have failed. It would have come under the car. That's what the eyewitnesses are telling us. Come out the back, and then Lewis would have been flat on the brakes. At least we can say the brakes work, only too well, and he ended up in the barrier. But as you say, he's fine. Yeah.
Is it an unusual spot for a front wing to disintegrate? I mean, I'm assuming we haven't seen it, but there was a lot of debris the marshals were picking up in that area. We did catch the back end of that. Would it be under particular stress at the end of a straight?
There is a bump at that corner. Perhaps if we stay on this when Kimi Räikkönen does a whole lap, then we can see. But there's a tunnel under the circuit at that point. I don't know if you can just see the exit of the tunnel and the beginning of it over there. So there is a natural bump in the circuit at that point. It's not been a problem for Mercedes. They've been here testing many laps, many times over the years. So they would have known that there's a bump there. If that's enough to dislodge a front wing, I'd be surprised. But it might just be one of those small things that happen in testing. I don't think we're going to get the chance because Kimi Raikkonen comes straight back in. But yes, there is a little bit of a bump there, but nothing that Mercedes shouldn't have been able to handle, nothing that they wouldn't have known about before.
Okay. Just to briefly summarise the situation then on day one, are all the horror stories and scare stories about how difficult these cars would be to be ready, you know, for this point in the season? Are they coming true? We're seeing so little running, and one or two teams, including McLaren, I'm hearing, not going to be able to run at all today.
Well, I guess the headline from today is that it was all going so well for Mercedes until they had the suspected front wing failure, and Lewis Hamilton's end up putting it in the barrier. As you say, McLaren not running at all. They've got a fairly major glitch with their car, which means that they can't even get it started and get out on track. Ferrari only doing a handful of laps. Red Bull not being out already, and Sebastian Vettel saying, even at this first day of the championship, if you like, we have to catch up. So, yeah, everybody having their problems, and the rest of the field only doing a few laps. Everybody having their problems, and the one team who is looking quite good for, Mercedes, have now had this rather sizable accident. So welcome to Formula 1 2014.
Great stuff. Okay, thank you very much for the moment, Ted. Yeah, on this day last year at Jerez, there were 637 laps compiled by the various teams. I think we'll be lucky to get 100 laps aggregate during the course of today. So yes, all these technical challenges that the teams talked about facing in the run-up to this season are certainly coming true at this early stage. A lot of work for all the teams up and down the grid to do to get themselves ready for the start of this season.
Yeah, keep counting those laps. Thank you very much, Craig. We'll be back with you later.
Now, we told you earlier about Lewis Hamilton suffering a crash on the first morning of pre-season testing in Jerez, and it's also been a worrying start for Ferrari and Force India. Kimi Raikkonen and Sergio Perez both needed rescuing by the recovery truck in Jerez after stopping out on track. Here was Raikkonen then, leaving the pits this morning. But he didn't return, and the recovery vehicle had to be called out. And it was soon delivering the Ferrari back to the garage, so early reliability concerns for them. Reigning Constructors champions Red Bull will be hoping for a smoother start. Sebastian Vettel joined new teammate Daniel Ricciardo this morning for the launch of the Renault-powered RB10. Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg on hand to show off their new car, the Mercedes W05. Both Red Bull and Mercedes feature the low nose required by new regulations. Before Force India's car took to the track, their drivers revealed a very different-looking nose. Former driver Nico Hülkenberg and Sergio Perez did the honours, but as we mentioned earlier, there have also been concerns over reliability. Reigning world champion Sebastian Vettel yet to take his new Red Bull out on track and says it's too early to predict whether he can win a 5th consecutive title.
Previous years we had new cars that we launched here in Jerez and drove for the first time, but in the end, you know, it was the same toys under the cover, just probably layout different and set up in a different way. Whereas this year, yeah, there's a lot of new things, and as you can see, you know, very little running so far, so everybody is struggling. It's a massive challenge to, yeah, get your ducks lined up and ready to roll out of the garage first of all.
Well, there's been plenty discussed about the switch from V8 engines to new turbocharged 1.6-litre engines for this season. Some felt the sound of the cars would be dampened, so to give you a sample of how things have changed, here's Lewis Hamilton's car from last year, as well then to compare it with this year's model.
There were fears that the cars were going to sound very quiet. That doesn't seem to be the case. What we did hear was a lot of strange sort of revving sounds and energy recovery systems at play, and I think that's going to be characterized throughout the season. Lots of strange sort of revving when you wouldn't expect to hear the car as the energy recovery systems, the hybrid systems generate electricity on braking and then deliver it again as a boost on acceleration.
And they'll...
We were in the championship battle last year, and whilst the second half of the season, with hindsight, we could have possibly afforded to have stopped developing the car a little bit sooner. We weren't to know that at the time, so we kept pushing through last season. That's obviously reduced our time to research and develop this year's car.
Toro Rosso also revealed their new car as well as a new driver lineup. And Daniel Kvyat joins Jean-Eric Vergne, who is now entering his third year driving for the team. Both are positive about their prospects this year.
It's definitely going to be a key year for myself, as for Toro Rosso too, and you know, both the team and myself are hoping to make the best out of it.
It's a good opportunity as the regulation changes to make a good quality step in front. So everybody has high expectations. I think everybody wants to win, and it's up to us to do the better job than the others.
Let's take you to Jerez, shall we? First day of testing ahead of the new season, and not the best of starts for Lewis Hamilton. A crash in his Mercedes. Let's hear from him right now.
Going out first, you hinted at it there. Is there a sense within the team that maybe this is the year?
Well, naturally, everyone we had such a positive year last year, so naturally going into Christmas and everything, everyone wanted to come into this year even stronger than we even ended last year. But knowing how big a challenge it was, everyone just worked as hard as they could, put even more effort in than they had in the past. And yeah, I mean, arriving and having the car ready, I mean, it's a huge accomplishment considering all the this is the most hardcore year in terms of changes that I've ever experienced in Formula One, and sure, Formula One's probably had for a long, long time. So to see it all come together and to get out on the track, they were like, they wanted me in the car at half an hour before I had to go out. So I did, and it was just good to get out there and just feel what the turbo was like. To have that much more curves, it's pretty quick.
You're going to have to change much your style. A lot of talk about fuel management, amongst other things. What sort of things are on your mind at the moment in terms of driving style?
To be honest, I'm not really thinking about it much. I'm just excited to get back out. There's a lot to learn. That those are things that will come. I mean, I know how to save fuel. Perhaps would be exaggerated this year, but in terms of getting the braking sorted this year, so I don't have the same problems I had last year. Looking after these tyres, getting the car to do the distance that we need, that they're really the concerns.
Reigning world champion Sebastian Vettel has been playing down expectations of winning a fifth consecutive title. Those views have also been echoed by Red Bull Chief Technical Officer Adrian Newey, who says last season's battle for the championship hampered preparations for 2014.
We have to catch up, yeah, I think it's really, first of all, to master the challenge, to get everything working with each other, and to be able to get past phase one of simply run the car.
We were in the championship battle last year, and whilst the second half of the season, with hindsight, we could have possibly afforded to have stopped developing the car a little bit sooner. We weren't to know that at the time, so we kept pushing through last season. That's obviously reduced our time to research and develop this year's car.
Well, there's been plenty discussed about the switch from V8 engines to a new turbocharged 1.6-litre engine for this season. Some felt the sound of the cars would be dampened. So to give you a sample of how things have changed, here's Lewis Hamilton's car from last year, as well as this year's model.
I'm sure it's going to be a bit quieter in the cockpit as well. So from that point of view, a whole probably different sensation as well, for the driver inside the car, not just for the volume and for the sound of the engine, but also I think in terms of drivability, grip level, etc., etc. So yeah, new year, new challenge, new regulations. It's exciting.
And there'll be a full roundup on Sky Sports F1 at 9 o'clock tonight, and that's followed by Ted Kravitz's testing notebook at 9:15. See all the races live on Sky Sports. The season begins with the Australian Grand Prix live on March the 16th on Sky Sports F1.
Kilmarnock have Lewis Hamilton suffered a crash in a dramatic first morning of pre-season testing in Jerez. This was the moment that Hamilton went flying off the track at the first corner. Mercedes claim the accident happened because of a front wing failure, which the team will continue to investigate. The right front wheel was badly damaged, but Hamilton left the car unhurt, and that was the end of their testing for the day.
Lewis Hamilton suffered a crash on a dramatic first morning of pre-season testing in Jerez. This was the moment that Hamilton went flying off the track at the first corner. Mercedes claim the accident happened because of a front wing failure, which you can see highlighted. The team will continue to investigate. The right front wheel was badly damaged, but Hamilton left the car unhurt. That was the end of their testing for the day.
The car doesn't stop when you're braking. It always is heart in your mouth, but you know, I've had it a few times in my career, so I'm all right. Initially, obviously, I didn't really know what happened. I just braked and nothing happened, so so it's always kind of frightening in those moments, but I'm still walking, so that's a good thing.
How different does the car feel from last year's car?
It feels a lot different. The braking is different, the power is different, the sound is different, the grip is different. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot to get used to. And in only those 18 laps, I didn't really, I didn't have a huge amount to download to the engineers. So you know, I wasn't on the limit of braking. I hadn't got flat out through a lot of the corners that usually would be. But you know, still, every little bit of experience helps.
Red Bull presented their new car to the media today. Reigning world champion Sebastian Vettel has been playing down expectations of winning a 5th consecutive title.
We have to catch up, yeah, I think it's really, first of all, to master the challenge, to get everything working with each other, and to be able to get past phase one of simply run the car.
We were in a championship battle last year, and whilst the second half of the season, with hindsight, we could have possibly afforded to have stopped developing the car a little bit sooner. We weren't to know that at the time, so we kept pushing through last season. That's obviously reduced our time to research and develop this year's car.
Let's go live to Jerez now, and Craig Slater is there. Now, Craig, there's actually been a shortage of action on the track today, but what have we learned?
I think that the lack of action spoke louder than words, if I can put it that way. Basically, most of the teams are not really ready yet for the start of this 2014 season. You heard Adrian Newey there saying he wished he'd begun development on the new car a little bit earlier last season. Sebastian Vettel saying that they have to catch up yet. These are very complex hybrid engines introduced this year, and all of the teams are pretty much still getting a grip on it. Adrian Newey saying that it will be reliability rather than outright performance which will be the key factor in the first set of races this season, and maybe after that they can start to work on aerodynamics and the chassis and more like that. So the teams are still very much grappling with basic problems at the moment. McLaren didn't even get their car out today, although we're assured the electrical fault that prevented that has been fixed, and Jenson Button will be in the car tomorrow morning. So it's a difficult day. If I could compare the lap totals, we had fewer than 100 laps run by the entire field today. This time last year we had 637 laps run by the field. No excuse for that. Perfect dry conditions today, and I think that statistic speaks volumes for the issues the F1 teams are having right now with these new engines.
Okay, well, talking about volumes and engines, this is the first time we've seen the new cars. What's the noise like from them?
It is markedly different. I think it's going to be perhaps a little bit of an acquired taste. I mean, I've been standing in the pit lane today. I've been standing next to the track, and normally if an F1 car, certainly last year, if an F1 car went past you, you would not be able to suffer the sound if you didn't have earplugs in. It would be physically painful. Today I've been able to stand next to the car without earplugs and not been painful at all. Indeed, when the cars go around to the far side of the track, it's impossible to hear them. So they certainly are quieter. In mitigation, it may be that they're not running the cars at the full rev limit at this stage. It's an attractive enough sound. You know, it perhaps doesn't translate fully onto television, but maybe for a live audience, I think they will miss the roar and scream of last year's cars a little bit. However, it's a different type of noise. Maybe it is an acquired taste. It's certainly a very different one, though.
Craig, thank you. Lewis Hamilton remained positive despite crashing in his new Mercedes on the first day of pre-season testing in Jerez. It was the first opportunity for teams to see how their new cars performed following the revolutionary rule changes from last season. Hamilton and Nico Rosberg unveiled their car this morning, and Hamilton gave us the first opportunity to hear the new 1.6-litre V6 engine. Hamilton completed 18 laps in his new car before front wing failure sent him crashing into the tyre barrier at the first corner. Here you can see the front wing has come away, but Hamilton was still positive about his new car.
When the car doesn't stop when you're braking, it always is hot in your mouth, but you know, I've had it a few times in my career, so I'm all right. Initially, obviously, I didn't really know what happened. I just braked and nothing happened, so it's always kind of frightening in those moments, but I'm still walking, so that's a good thing.
You did get the most laps in thus far. It's a good start. Do you think you're a little bit ahead of the game at Mercedes at the moment? I know it's very early.
Well, I think today, seeing how few people have been going out just shows you how big the task is. It's just, you know, and we would come out the garage and we have to come back in, and there's all these system checks they have to do, and it's just really, it's almost like a completely new system that the engineers have to get used to. So we're all kind of blind at the moment and just taking it as it comes, but there's so much to learn. So of course, the more running you do, the better you'll be by the time you get to the first race. But to have already done this many laps is definitely a really good start.
Well, Kimi Räikkönen has moved to Ferrari for 2014, and he got to try out the new car on the opening day. With so many changes, reliability will be crucial, and Räikkönen's session lasted just half a lap before he stopped on the track with a technical problem. The Finn's car had to be brought back to the pits on the back of a truck. He returned to the track in the afternoon and eventually set the fastest time of the day.
It doesn't feel an awful lot different. I mean, obviously new engine, slightly different way of delivering power and stuff, but in the end it's quite similar. It's not like a night and day different.
World champion Sebastian Vettel has a new car, a new teammate for 2014, with Daniel Ricciardo joining the team, but they unveiled the RB10 today. Their testing was delayed by what was labelled as a silly problem. Vettel didn't emerge from the pits until 15 minutes before the end of the session. And the world champion only completed one installation lap, not setting a time.
Previous years we had new cars that we launched here in Jerez and drove for the first time, but in the end, you know, it was the same toys under the cover, just probably layout different and set up in a different way. Whereas this year, yeah, there's a lot of new things, and as you can see, you know, very little running so far, so everybody is struggling. It's a massive challenge to, yeah, get your ducks lined up and ready to roll out of the garage first of all.
Complicated road cars, hybrid road cars, aircraft, then by the time we see them in public, they've had a huge amount of running, they've had a huge amount of private testing. Obviously in Formula One we don't have that luxury, we have to come out straight away and try and get these very complicated systems to work in the public arena. So it was always likely this was going to be the case, I think.
Well, Force India were another team to unveil their car today, including its unusual protruding front nose. Sergio Perez got his hands on the new car, but he was another to suffer from reliability problems. The issue did get resolved. Perez was eventually able to complete 11 laps, so it was a quiet day on the track. Perez's teammate Nico Hülkenberg says that wasn't much of a surprise.
I expected it to be a little bit difficult and chewy like it is now, and you know, a bit tough, and obviously for spectators a bit disappointing not to see many cars out running. But you know, you have to understand that it's a huge challenge and very, very complex. You know, for the engineers, the new power units, the new powertrain. There's lots to be learned.
And McLaren didn't venture out onto the track at all on day one. Jenson Button was scheduled to drive. It's expected he'll be in the car tomorrow. Now to Jerez to join Craig Slater. Craig, what have we learned about the cars themselves today?
We've learned that the teams are still pretty much at their base camps in terms of developing these engines and making sure that they're reliable. We had a total of 93 laps run by all the teams today compared to 637 of day one of testing last year. I suppose most disappointed of all will be McLaren, who didn't manage any running at all, Ted Kravitz. And isn't that a little bit alarming considering they had, what, the best part of half a season to focus on this 2014 project because they were out of last season's championship so early?
It's alarming and it's frustrating for McLaren, and a lot of them are wondering why we're starting testing so early when clearly most of the teams haven't got their cars ready. I think if everyone was ready, then we would have seen many, many laps by everybody. As it was, we had many teams going out doing one lap and saying they were happy with progress, that was actually a decent shakedown for them. But for McLaren to have this probably a major problem in terms of getting the car ready, because they couldn't get the car and the engine and the gearbox all together, an installation problem they called it, all together and talking to each other. That's a major problem because of course the car isn't going anywhere, but it's probably quite easy for them to sort out. They say they're going to sort it out overnight and they hope to be running tomorrow. I think McLaren spent the day chasing their tails somewhat, trying to track down an issue that would make them, would allow them to get it fixed and get it out on track. In the end, they were probably never going to get that actually achieved. So it's just as well they said, let's forget about the first day. We didn't do any running. We'll put that under our belts. We'll get on with tomorrow.
Mercedes looked the most ready, if we like, until 18 laps into Lewis Hamilton's run. Now, we know it's a front wing failure. Have you been able to glean any more information on exactly what went wrong there?
Yeah, so we're looking now from some footage that we got of the crash actually happening in the aftermath when Lewis Hamilton was in the barrier. At what point the front wing detached from the nose cone? It looks like very much it's at the pillars. There are some pillars that come down and join onto the front wing. If you imagine it, that's the front wing and that's the little pillars. Those pillars are only attached by a very small amount onto the front wing. Now, of course, Mercedes are a very big team. They would have done all their stress analysis and load factor evaluations and understanding how much load actually those pillars need to take. But it does look like the failure was in that area, and that's why Mercedes said, even though we do have a spare nose cone, we're not just going to bolt the spare on and send Lewis Hamilton out again until we understand precisely why the wing fell off at that pillar point. So it's a big thing for Mercedes to understand. They've got to redesign that part. You know, they could go out and might not be able to do the rest of this test. I'm not sure, not saying that's going to happen at all. They need to understand why the front wing failed at that point.
Kimi Raikkonen replaced Lewis Hamilton as the fastest driver today. He had the longest innings as well, 31 laps in total. It was his first day back in red on the track, you know, in a Ferrari. He was, as usual, understated when he spoke to you afterwards. But can he be quietly confident about the car beneath him heading into this season?
I think as much as anybody can be confident on this crazy day of first day of F1 2014, it's Ferrari and Kimi Raikkonen. At least the car didn't break down completely. Yes, like everybody else, they did have one breakdown. That was early on in the day. But after that, they were able to do some systems checks and some evaluation of their aerodynamics versus what the car is doing against what they're saying the computer says the car should be doing. So it was a good day for Ferrari. Whether that will lead us anywhere in terms of race wins or the championship, it's simply impossible to say. But I think we can give day one at Jerez to Ferrari.
Just finally then, let's talk about the champion, Sebastian Vettel, the new father. His other new baby was this RB10, which Adrian Newey says he'd like to have begun the project a bit earlier. But is he playing a long game? Do you think they're taking a look at everyone else at the moment? And are they holding back maybe their developments for a little bit, you know, maybe after these early races are out the way?
Maybe. I mean, what Red Bull was saying was that the early races, really, reliability is going to be a big factor for them. But talk about reliability. They weren't reliable today. It seems like a mistake by their own mechanics meant that the car was broken for 3/4 of the day until they managed to get out with about half an hour left. So little mistakes coming into the system with the complexity. And I think what we said earlier, that this year and how difficult it is to get it right with all these new rule changes will be either the making of Red Bull, showing that they can win in in both the stable regulations last year and now very different regulations. If they can win in those 2 years back to back, then that really will be the making of them. Of course, they've won the last 4 championships. They should have nothing else to prove. But it does look like they're up against it a little in terms of reliability. We don't know where they are on pace, but we will see, hopefully, over the next few days, if they manage to get some laps under their belt. But I think they're playing catch-up at the moment.
Thank you very much, Ted. Yeah, I suppose it was as much what didn't happen today as what did happen that's interesting, and that is going to, I suppose, be the concern of most of the teams. Christian Horner, the Red Bull team principal, saying he thought as much as half the field might not make it through the first Grand Prix in Australia. I think at the moment maybe 1 or 2 teams are perhaps a little bit worried whether they can get their car ready for that first Grand Prix, because these new hybrid engines really are proving quite a headache.
Thanks, Craig. Well